Well, hey there, pen fans. Welcome to episode number 317 of Goulet Q&A, where fountain pens are still a thing. I'm Brian Goulet here at Goulet Pens. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about a whole bunch of new stuff because I took last week off. And so I got 2 weeks of stuff to make up for, and I'm still not covering everything. I'm saving some for next week. But anyway, we got some deals going on at Goulet Pens for July, so I'll talk a little bit about those. How to prime a vacuum filling pen, the most durable demonstrator pens, which inks to steer away from in the Pilot E95S with that inlaid nib, comparing the Jinhao X159 and the X450, and if I'm Team Coke or Team Pepsi, hashtag it's complicated. And I'll be spotlighting the largest ink capacity piston filling pen made in the world today. So it should be pretty fun. It's good to be back. Took a little time off. But let's start off with some feedback, shall we? All right, feedback here. We got one from Addertooth1 says, what, no love for the incredibly durable Ebonite or hard rubber? This is after my video last week, or last episode, talking about plastic materials, different types of plastic for pens. Addertooth says, I restore very old fountain pens. I know which material is the easiest to get apart without the component pieces breaking or cracking. The biggest downside to hard rubber is how it will oxidize over the space of 50 to 100 years, but it will polish right back up to a lustrous black, red, orange rather easily. If I was choosing a material to make a pen with, which I want my great-grandchildren to enjoy, it would be hard rubber. Most modern plastics become brittle with age, and I will say, of the modern plastics, PMMA, also known as plexiglass, seems to avoid brittleness if kept out of sunlight. I have a Waterman 100-year desk pen, circa 1920s, which has held up rather well, but it was kept in a closed box for the better part of its 100-year existence. Wow. Well, there's definitely something to be said for that. I am not the end-all be-all vintage guy. I know enough to be dangerous, but the hard thing is we don't have any modern pens that have been around for 100 years to see how they're going to hold up. But definitely hard rubber is a pretty good material. It is more expensive. It's harder to get, harder to do. There's not as many suppliers that make them because it's just not as in vogue of a material these days, probably because it's more expensive. But yeah, it's a natural material. And there are definitely still pens made out of hard rubber, one of which I'm spotlighting today. But yeah, great feedback. Now, I will say that you made a very solid case for hard rubber, but the nature of the question was specifically about comparing different types of plastics from last time. So I wasn't trying to cover all materials. However, I'm still working on this video that I've mentioned several times that I don't have a published date for yet because it's too daunting, about all the different pen materials that you might see. And for sure, hard rubber will be on there. So I'll apply that towards my comprehensive video in the future. Don't hold me to any specific dates. Okay, Philip Franco 55 says, just an FYI, PA Scribe is a YouTuber who's one of several royal calligraphers in England. So this was last week. I got a question about PA Scribe Rhodia pads that has thicker, different type of paper. It's calligraphy paper. So I looked up PA Scribe. I didn't know to. I didn't heard of them. I didn't research it all that deeply. But you're right. I looked up PA Scribe on YouTube, and it's Paul Antonio, who I don't know him personally, but I've definitely seen him before. I've seen some of his calligraphy stuff coming up. So as soon as you mentioned that as the YouTuber and I saw his video, I was like, oh, I know him. I know of him. I recognize him. There you go. So that's kind of cool. So I'm glad you pointed that out. I learned something. And now it makes more sense why the pads would be calligraphy paper. All right. Paul McHugh says, can I mention that in my experience, a Bach nib will not properly fit on a Yovo feed, and the converse is true. This is when I was talking about swapping nibs on the 580, or no, on the Eco, and like which nib size, which nib like numbers will fit in different ones. It gets kind of weird. Okay, Paul says, Bach nibs have a different geometry, and while you can stuff a Bach nib into a Yovo nib collar, it will not work properly. The ink flow is terrible. If you insist on putting a Bach nib on a Yovo feed, you will need to bend the base of the Bach nib to fit it. So I guess it's just pinched a little bit more. So you got to kind of like, If you kind of like force it in there, it'll sort of naturally do that, but it's generally not great. And then if you ever put it back on your Bach pen, you're gonna have to bend it back the other way. Okay, so you said, conversely, putting a JoWo nib into a Bach feed will be very difficult. Yes. So in that case, I guess it'll be too wide and you're having to like narrow it in. So it's tough. It's tough. So I haven't tried this, and I also don't know which nib size you were working on, if that's like a universal thing. Honestly, there's not as many Bach nib pens these days as there are JoWo. It could very well be that some manufacturers are having Bach make some of their nibs, but they're not like Bach nibs. They're not like the standard Bach nibs. In which case it could be different. The thing that's confusing about nibs is there's very little standardization across any of it. So a lot of times people want to swap nibs, but it's like there's small details on these nibs that make a huge difference in terms of their fit, flow, things like that. And sometimes it's not even obvious to the naked eye what makes them different. It could literally be like the thickness of the metal on the nib and stuff like that. It's kind of aggravating, but nonetheless, I appreciate you sharing that because I didn't test the Bach ones a lot. I actually had a hard time finding like a standard Bach nib as I was doing the video last time. All right, Laura Karras, 6814 says, regarding nib sizes, as I understand it, this is to follow up even more on what I just said. TWSBI nib sizes are customized, not the standard JoWo nib sizes. That's what we discussed last time. And nib sizes are pretty much coded based on the width of the base. The TWSBI 4 is slightly smaller than the JoWo 5. I've heard some say it's approximately a 4.5 on that scale. The TWSBI 5 is a tad bigger than the size 5 nib shape-wise. Yeah, 5 is really like a 5.5 of sorts in the JoWo scale. Sometimes when you swap around nibs, once you keep the feed and nib together, you will be able to force a slightly bigger nib or a nib that is curved slightly differently into a pen. It may work out great, or there may be flow issues. Once you keep the associated feed, it may just work out beautifully. So yeah, sort of going off of what Paul just said is like, yeah, they don't swap very well. I find that if you keep the matching nib and feed together, you're likely to have a little bit more success. But even still, it's going to really depend on the type of pen. So, if you have the nib and the feed, so if you have individual nib units or whole pens, and you can keep the nib and the feed together, swapping around, you might see a little more success because that's just one less variable to be different. But your mileage will vary a lot on every single one of these things that you try. So, it's definitely like you're taking your pen's life into your own hands when you start swapping nibs. But that's part of the fun, right? And then last one I got for feedback, Celtic Vols Girl says, thank you for the information on that ink from Pelikan Edelstein. I was curious on that pronunciation as well, so I looked it up because I was not confident in how to pronounce the Pelikan ink of the year. Seems that it has a French and German pronunciation. But since we know Pelikan is German, I'm going with that. And it's pronounced Achat. The A is like the ah in father, so ah, and the CH is a guttural sound, similar to the CH in Bach, at least according to Google. I did not know that and was not pronouncing it that way either. So achat, I guess would be the achat would be maybe the more appropriate way to say it in a kind of a German way. I'm probably butchering it either way. And then if I'm like, oh, it's achat, and then people are like, what are you saying? So we have to kind of Americanize it. So, you can remember what it is and then type it. Or you don't have to type it at all because we're going to have it linked in the description. So anyway, thanks for looking that up. Something that I could easily Google myself, but didn't. Anyway, let's go to some new stuff. All right, I got a whole bunch of new stuff to show you. So I'm going to kind of go through it pretty quickly. Definitely check out the new arrivals on Goulet Pens as well as coming soon, because there's a bunch of new stuff coming as well. Usually July is kind of like a slow time for product launches, but I don't know. There's a bunch of cool stuff that's coming out, so we're carrying it. First thing I've got here is the Itoya Blade. If you're familiar with the Pilot Varsity, it's very similar to that. So similar price point. It's about $4. It is a pre-filled, intended to be disposable fountain pen. So this is the fountain pen for the person that truly doesn't want to have to maintain a fountain pen. You don't have to fill it, clean it, anything like that. You can buy a disposable fountain pen. And it actually writes pretty well, just like the Varsity. This is a fine nib though. So the Varsity is a medium. This one's a fine. It's available in blue and black. It's got a little bit different kind of design to it than a Varsity does. It's got a nice cap seal to it, so it performs pretty well. So that's why we're carrying it. But yeah, so if you're interested in a disposable pen, I would imagine that you can probably refill it similar to the hack that you can do with the Varsity. We've got a video on that. Yeah, if you don't want to deal with any of that, you can get a pen for $4 and have a great writing experience. I find that these types of pens, specifically the Varsity, but now that we have this, the Blade and the Varsity. This is a great pen to carry around with you, that if you want to be able to hand out a pen to somebody to write with a fountain pen, first of all, it's inexpensive. It's a good experience to write with. So it's a good introduction for somebody who doesn't know it. And if they mash the nib down, you're not out a lot. Or if they really like it and you want to be like, keep it, and they get used to it, it could be an introduction for them for the fountain pen world without having to go like all in on the cleaning and filling and the whole thing. So anyway, I think they're really cool for that purpose. So we have those, blue and black. Let's see here. What else do we have? We have kind of the opposite of a disposable pen. We have a limited edition pen. These are the Ferris Wheel Press Superman Edition Marquise pens, pen and ink sets, actually. So there's 3 different colors of this. There is the Voice of Metropolis, which is red. Scarlet Metropolis ink is what comes with that. It's like a deep red with a blue shimmer. Looks really cool. Very bold red as well. The pen Fortress of Solitude. This is a turquoise pen. It's got Frozen Fortress ink that comes with it, which is a turquoise with a silver shimmer. Looks pretty classy as well. And then a View from Above, which is blue. It includes Heroic Blue ink, which is a cobalt blue with red sheen and gold shimmer. Pretty complex there. So you can also get the bottles of ink separately. So the pens, you can't get just the pen. It's the pen and the ink as a set. But you can get the ink separately. It's a 28 milliliter bottle of ink for $35. The pen and ink set together is $200. This is a steel nib pen. It's the same style as the Marquise, which you might have seen. Maybe not. They're not. Ferris Wheel Press is a well-known ink brand. Their pens are a little bit lesser known, but they did like fully legit franchised pens with the new Superman. So really cool designs. Of course, their packaging is always phenomenal. So really cool packaging, custom packaging for each of these pens, and also custom engraving on the grip of the pens as well as the nib. So a different engraving design on each of the 3 pens, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, custom packaging on the ink as well. So they only have it in a medium nib, but it's a number 6 size stainless steel nib. They look pretty unique. These are standard international cartridge converter pens. And so pretty interesting. You can go check those out. I don't know how long they're going to be available. I imagine there's going to be somewhat of a limited nature of them, but I don't know like a specific number or anything. So if you're interested in them, you're a Superman fan, then you can have a pen to match. So there you go. We also have some pens from Monteverde with the Prima Piston. So this is in 3 different colors. We have a black, which is like a black demo with rose gold trim. We have a gray marble, which is like a black and gunmetal trim. And then we have orange marble, which has got a black and gunmetal trim. So price of these is $92. And they've got a number 6 size Yovo made nib, extra fine, medium, broad, 1.1, and OmniFlex. These are all made by Yovo. So that's pretty interesting. It's a little bit different style of pen. It's not like earth-shatteringly different than some other Monteverde pens, but it's a little bit lighter pen. A lot of Monteverde's pens are metal and they can be kind of heavy, like the Invincia and stuff like that. But these are lighter pens. So if you're into having a lighter pen, that's kind of cool. Not a huge ink capacity on these pistons, but definitely workable. It's about a milliliter, which is plenty. It's about twice what you get with a regular cartridge. So pretty interesting. So go check them out. These are Goulet exclusives as well. Next, we have a non-Goulet exclusive, Benu Euphorias. We have a lot of exclusive Benu Euphorias, but these ones are not exclusive to us. This is 2 pens called Golden Beach and White Beach. So Golden Beach is gold trim. It's like a kind of a peach color. It's like a translucent. It's got a clear grip. It's got gold glitter in it. It looks really nice. So that's kind of cool. So it's definitely Benu. It's got glitter and all that kind of stuff, but it's somewhat less intense Benu. So if you're into a subtler Benu These are a bit more on the subtler side, but it's kind of cool. That translucence really looks nice. Makes it kind of glow a little bit. And then the White Beach is similar in its overall kind of aesthetic, except it's going to be like a white translucent, kind of like a milky white color. And that's got silver glitter in it with silver trim. There is one little gold ring that's around the nib unit, and because the grip is clear, you can see it. So it's like, it's not everything silver. You get that one little gold ring, which is like, I mean, I guess it gives it kind of a two-tone look, but it's like, wow, man, wish I could get that silver, but that's okay. It's gold. 157 for this, same price as all the other Euphorias. They have Schmidt nibs, number 6 stainless steel nibs, which write great. Fine, medium, broad, 1.1, and a fine flex. So you can check those out. Standard international cartridge converter on those as well. And then the last pen that I have to talk about, I'm actually going to show you. This is the Magna Carta Mag 600 Modern Rodden Blue Black. So what does Modern Rodden mean? Well, it's not abalone shell. It's not actually Rodden. So what Magna Carta has done is essentially they cast a resin, they engrave these flutes into the material, and then they fill it with this like iridescent, kind of like a foil, I guess. I don't know if that's technically the term for it, but it's a synthetic material. It's not abalone shell. So if you're not as crazy about the harvesting of abalone shell, but you love the look of it, this might be the pen for you. But it gives it a lot of abalone look, but you're getting it for, honestly, what would be much more affordable than if this whole thing was actually abalone shell. But it looks really cool. It has kind of like a crinkly look in there, so it's a little bit different than you would get. But yeah, the color is really interesting. It's got like a purplish, greenish, kind of teal blue, kind of color shift that happens. But beautiful looking pen, looks really cool. It's got the 14 karat true flex nib on it. So if you're familiar with Magna Carta's flex nibs, they are some of the best modern flex nibs that you can get. And they are cartridge converter, but you can eyedropper convert them as well. Ebonite bodies as well, hard rubber. So there you go. If you like those hard rubber pens, yeah, you get a nice blend of like vintage and modern on this pen. Pretty neato. So yeah, we have those. These are Goulet exclusives. So be sure to check those out if you're interested. Really turns out pretty nice. They're a slight premium over the normal Mag 600s. This is going to be $500 for this pen, but considering the amount of work involved in making this happen, I think it's pretty decent if you're in the market for a pen that price. All right, and then I do have the Maiora Everest to talk about, which we're going to be doing in the spotlight, so I won't get deep into the details on that, but stick around because it's coming. Let's go to some company updates. All right, I got a couple of different updates. One, we got a new video out. I didn't get any videos out last week because, I was trying to take some time off, trying to get some downtime. Also, this is kind of a slow time of year, generally speaking, for the pen industry, because everybody's outside traveling, doing stuff, not as much like sitting around at your desks all day looking at pens or thinking about pens. But, if you are, you're probably watching this video and you're like, I'm not traveling yet. Maybe in 2 weeks or something like that. But anyway, so summertime, is a good time for us to, take a little bit of time off as a team, spend time with our families and stuff. So that's what I was doing. I was spending some time with my family. Anyway, I'll get more about the details of that in my Brian's Adventures. But anyway, so I got one video for you this week besides Q&A, which is another ink showdown. This is on chocolate brown inks. So yeah, nice deep chocolate brown inks. Nothing too crazy in this video, just a bunch of cool looking dark brown inks. So you can go check that out if you haven't seen it already. And then we do have some deals going on because again, it is summer. It's a little bit slower. Thought we'd try and make some things interesting for you all. And freshen up our inventory a little bit, save up for all this new stuff that we're buying. Typical retail business stuff. We have a deal that we're running all month of July, a buy one, get one on Jinhao Shark pens. So very affordable pens, sub $5. And yeah, you can get one for free when you buy one. So that's kind of cool. And then we do have some different sales going on all throughout the month. We've basically broken it down into weeks. So we're running a different sale through email each week. So we're changing up the deals, different price points, different, benefits that you get with each kind of sale block. But it's all through email. So if you're not subscribed to our email, you may want to do that just to check out what some of our deals are. No commitments or anything. But you can sign up for email. You'll get a free ink sample package set by signing up. And then you can see what all the deals are. So really not a bad way to go. So anyway, go sign up for that. Check it out if you want to see our deals. And then we are going to be starting next week doing a Christmas in July sale going on. Well, actually, no, it is going on now. Sorry. I'm recording this in advance. I'm recording this on Tuesday before the sale is started, but this is going out on Friday by the time the sale's already started. But either way, we're like mid-sale right now. So if you haven't heard about it yet, and you're watching this when the video comes out on Friday, you have until Tuesday, July 15th, 2025, to go check out our Christmas in July sale. If you're watching this video after that, I'm very sorry. You'll have to time travel to get the deal, which is probably going to cost more than it would save you on the deal. So maybe not worth it. Maybe. All right, let's get into the questions for this week, shall we? Okie dokie. Question number 1. This is coming from Rafael Formolo 9401. Says, hey Brian, thanks for the video. I would like to know if there is a safe and effective way of priming the feed of a vacuum filling pen if it starts to run dry, despite having plenty of ink still in it. With pistons fillers, it's pretty easy. Or cartridge converter for that matter, you just kind of turn down the knob and then more ink is forced out. But with vacuum fillers, there is an evident danger of making a huge mess. Thanks in advance. That is true. So I grabbed the pen, I have an empty one and then I have a inked one so that we can sort of see what's happening with both. These are TWSBI VAC 700Rs. So what is happening with a vacuum filling pen, if you're not familiar with how they work, it's a little bit different than your typical pen. A typical piston pen, you would be, unscrewing the knob on the back and it just moves the piston gradually up and down as you are doing it. I'm trying to see if I have a pen. Yes, I do. Another TWSBI, look at that. I got irises all over the place here. Here you go, typical piston pen. You turn the knob and it goes down. So when your ink is drying out inside your feed, you literally just turn the knob down a little bit, it pushes ink out, gets it all saturated, and you're pretty good to go. So that's cool, but you can't really do that on a vacuum filling pen. For one, as you unscrew the knob, it's not moving anything. I mean, all it's doing is moving the rod out just a tiny, tiny little bit because it's part of what a vacuum filling pen does is it seals off the ink chamber when you're all closed up like this. So it is moving slightly. I don't even know if you can see it so easily. It's very, very little bit there that it's moving. Yeah, maybe. So it's moving it basically just like opening and closing that little gap there. But in order to force ink down through the pen, like a piston filler does, you essentially would have to pull up the knob so that it goes up onto the part of the walls where it's making contact with the seal. And then you'd have to press it down to force some ink out. Now it can be done. It's not the hardest thing in the world, but you will have to use your own judgment whether you feel comfortable doing that. I will say I tend not to do it with vacuum filling pens because there is just a risk there. But you know what? We have the camera on, so if I do an epic fail, it'll just make for good entertainment. So I've got a pen here. It's actually a pen that's been sitting around for a while. So I wonder if it's dried out at all. Let me see. Nope, it's writing just fine. That is one thing that TWSBI's really good at. I probably have not written with this pen in 3 months, but it just went right away, and I've had it stored nib up. So that's kind of cool. But either way, say I wanted to flood my feed, right? Maybe I'll give you, there you go. I'll give you a white background here so it's a little easier to see. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take and try doing, it's hard to see because I've got ink in there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to unscrew the knob on that pen. I'm going to pull it up just a little bit and then try pumping it down and see if that does anything. See if that actually gets any ink out onto the thing. So I kind of go by feel a little bit so I can tell when I'm starting to make contact here. So I'm going to pull it up just a little bit. I can see some air bubbles coming up right there. And then I'm just going to push it down. The nice thing is I can push it down kind of slowly. I see air bubbles moving, but is that doing anything? Like, I don't see ink coming down and flooding the feed. Let me keep trying it. I really don't see it. I think because what's happening is as I'm moving it down, it's not like forcing the ink out because it's creating a vacuum back here, but here it's just sort of equalizing so it's like it's compressing this, but it's not just forcing ink straight out. It's kind of sucking air in. And so it's just kind of creating bubbles inside the pen. Oh, I was able to get a little bit together. Okay. So if I pump it a little faster, I get some. Let me see if I can take it back further. Okay. If I go back a little further. Okay, there. I got some feed saturation. It's actually not as risky as I would have thought. I haven't done this in a long time with a vacuum filling pen, and now it's writing just a little bit wetter. So I found, at least on the VAC 700 here, I had to take the seal almost about halfway up, to about here, before it would actually create enough kind of pressure in here to force the ink out onto the feed. So, you can do it. Like you can hold the pen in your hand. You can sort of control your fingers. If you're just mashing it like this, it's going to be hard to control. But if you put your fingers here, you can have a lot of kind of fine tuning. Just like this. You can have a lot of fine tuning and you can sort of control it and keep an eye on here. Just do it on top of paper or paper towel or something like that. You're not, unless you really jam it down on there, you're not going to like blast ink out of the pen. If you just do it in a relatively controlled manner, I think you'll probably be okay. I didn't practice this ahead of time, but I'm actually kind of surprised at how well it works. See, as I'm drawing it back now, it's actually drawing the ink back out of the feed. That's kind of interesting. Uh-oh. Now I might be in trouble. Because now I drew it further back and I've got a lot of ink in front of my piston. Well, let's see what happens. I might eat my words now. Okay. I'm trying to go very careful with it. Oh, see, now it's all vacuum there, but I don't have a way for the ink to get back behind my seal. Okay, so this will kind of work if your ink is not if your pen's not completely full. Oh, I'm trying to be real careful with it. Okay. Whew. I risked danger there. So I was able to get it past the point, but yeah, okay. So that's the calculated risk you take there. So if you bring it back a portion, you can flood your feed, but if you bring it back too far, you're going to kind of trap yourself, which I guess if that's the case, then you could just you could take a paper towel or a napkin or something like that, and you could wrap it around the feed and you could press it slowly. And if you do get a little ink that leaks out, you can just kind of wipe it right up. So again, it's fairly controlled, but do you really want to risk that? Probably not, especially if you're in the middle of a meeting or something like that. Probably not what you want to do. So assuming you don't want to take the risk and you don't want to do what I just did, because my heart rate did go up a little bit just then as I was doing that. I was like, oh boy, I kind of trapped myself, but it's all right. No disaster. It didn't even get ink anywhere. I think that, there's not a lot of magic that you can really do here. I think you have two options. Basically, one, you could take the ink that you filled it with and you could dip the nib back into the ink bottle, thus reconstituting it. You're getting it saturated just as if you would if you were, pressing down ink through the pen, except this way you're dipping it from the bottle. So that's a good way to do it. If you don't have the bottle of ink or you don't want to dip it back in the bottle of ink for whatever reason, you can do it with a cup of water as well. Because if it's dried out at all, unless it's super crispy dried out and needs to be scrubbed and cleaned, typically that's not the case, especially if you have an inked up pen. Probably hasn't been sitting around that long, but if it has, then you might need a full rehab cleaning. But if you have a pen that's been inked up in a recently enough period of time, basically, if you just dip the nib down into water, or if you feel like making a little bit of a mess, you can run it under a sink, sink faucet with a little bit of water, but it will spray a little bit. So that tends to be a little messier way to do it. But I think it's easier if you just get a cup of water and then you dip it in there. The water is going to, saturate, get all in the feed, and it's going to get whatever dried stuff has happened on the feed, and it's going to kind of reconstitute it and get it flowing again. Now you're going to have water on the feed then, so you need to kind of write with it a little bit, or maybe you take a paper towel and kind of, draw it like that. You would want to open the piston up, right? So to get the ink flowing again, because again, most vacuum fillers, it's going to lock off your inkwell here, your ink reservoir. So you want to open it back up, dip it in your water, right on it with, a pad or a napkin, a paper towel, something absorbent. And it'll seem pretty watery at first, but then it'll be flowing again just fine. So that's my recommendation. The riskiest one, but the most exciting one would be trying to push the piston. Dip it back in the bottle of ink, relatively safe, and then dip it in water would be the next one. So that's my advice. Hopefully that's of use to you. But thank you for the question. All right, next question. This is from John Tate, 2404. I like demonstrator pens, but I've been disappointed in their longevity. I've had my TWSBI Diamond 580 Clear crack several times, usually because I dropped it. They always replace the parts for a low shipping fee, but it's still a hassle. I get that. My Platinum Preppy cracked, which is not unusual. And even an old Pelican 200 Amber cracked. Partly my fault, as it got hard to turn the knob to fill, and I didn't understand that I could lubricate the piston. But here's the question. What plastic is strongest or most long-lasting for a demonstrator pen? Does it make any difference whether it's totally clear or colored? I don't mind scratches because that's honorable wear, but I'd like it to hold together, not crack and not leak for a long life of daily use. Okay, so it's somewhat tough to answer this question because I don't necessarily know what type of plastic is used on most demonstrator pens, unfortunately. I can speak about it in principle in terms of like which plastic should be the strongest, but I can talk about pens that tend to do pretty well. But I may not be able to correlate exactly which pens are demonstrators that are using the specific materials that are good. So I'll try to cover this question as much as I can, but forgive me if it seems a little bit discombobulated. So the inherent issue with all demonstrator resins is that the clarity and the scratch resistance and brittleness and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be a balance between those. There's no perfect plastic out there. You get pens anywhere that range from like Noodler's pens that are cellulose butyrate that are clear but not that clear, and they tend to be kind of hazy and a little bit scuffy looking. That's the nature of the material. You can polish them up a little bit, but they're going to yellow over time, and they're going to, of course, have that beautiful smell that you know and love. But then also it's going to show a lot of those wear, like daily wear scratches, the honorable wear that you're talking about with the cellulose butyrate. But it is very impact resistant, so you really don't deal with cracking issues with those pens. If you have pens that are super, super clear, like the Platinum Preppy, that's a relatively thin plastic as well. So they're great because they're very affordable pens. But at the same time, like they're very brittle and can be crushed pretty easily. They'll hold up well if you treat them well. But I've definitely had some like in my pocket one time and I sat weird and just crushed the thing. If you put a lot of weight on it, it's going to crush. So I don't know what material that's made of, but that's definitely a more brittle plastic. So essentially, when you have plastic that is really good at not being scratched and it polishes up really well, it tends to be more brittle and tends to want to crack easier. So there is a little bit of a trade-off sometimes between like how clear something can look and how well it will resist scratches over time and how durable it will be. So PMMA, polymethyl methacrylate, that is known as like a higher end resin, right? So it's a plexiglass that's a branded material, but it's made out of that. Those are good. I don't know how many I don't know if they have it. I mean, they have it. They must have it clear because there is clear plexiglass out there. I would imagine that probably most of your higher end pens with gold nibs, again, I'm speculating a little bit here because I don't know for pure facts, but I would imagine some of the higher end injection molded pens, like some of your sailors and pilots and things like that, I would speculate that those are going to be made out of PMMA, which are pretty good overall at resisting scratches, impact resistance. They have a pretty good balance overall. The material is a little more expensive, and it's a pain to polish them. So I know from the years that we've worked with Brian and Andrea Gray from Edison Pens, we've done just a boatload of different exclusives out of all kinds of materials with them. So we've talked a lot about different materials, and they've been very forthright with us about what it takes to make and manufacture and polish and sand, these different materials. And there's definitely some resins that are a lot harder to polish and get looking really good. Once you get them looking good, then they hold up. I think PMMA is one of those. So to polish them by hand is an absolute bear. I think most of the time with PMMA, they take those materials and they put them into a tumbler with like an abrasive media, and they let them tumble for like a day or two. And that's what polishes them up. Doing it by hand would just take forever. So the difficult thing about that material in a demonstrator is that you have to get it polished really, really, really well in order to have it look really clear. And you can do that on the outside. You can tumble the outside of a pen, but you can't do the inside. That you have to polish by hand. So if you can injection mold it and it looks really clear, that's why I don't 100% know. I haven't observed for myself injection molding PMMA clear material. I'm sure it can be done, but I haven't seen that done for myself. I don't know what it comes out looking like and how much it needs to be polished. So it may be that the injection molding process allows that to happen, but you can also, it's also a material that you can sort of cast into rods, and then you can turn it down as well. So anyway, PMMA is a good one, but I would imagine, I think that most of the PMMA resins are going to have colors to them. They're not going to be perfectly clear. Acrylic acetate is a very common cast resin material that typically is a really good balance as well between, durability, polishability, impact resistance. Tends to be generally a pretty good wearing material. Not as many of them are clear. Because that's not an injection moldable material. That's something that has to be cast into like sheets and cut into rods. And so you typically don't see a lot of those because the process for making those is labor intensive. Not just making the material, but then to make the pens, you're having to turn them individually. And that would just be a very expensive demonstrator pen. So you don't typically see that. You typically see pens with more interesting materials. So acrylic acetate would be a good one, but I don't really know. I can't name you offhand a clear demonstrator pen that is acrylic acetate. However, we've done a bunch of pens over the years with Edison that have like translucence to them. And part of your question was, does it matter whether it's totally clear or colored? I think it might depend sometimes on the material. Some of them might fare better clear or might, be more color tintable than others. But I don't believe that there's inherently much difference between having a color to the pen and having it just be perfectly clear in terms of its durability, if you're working within a certain material. So, if you have, for example, an acrylic acetate, if you just cast a solid clear rod of it, and you turn it down versus one with a color tint to it, I don't think that's going to affect its durability. So, that's one thing. But I mentioned Noodler's pens, the Lamy Vista. So Lamy, I know they use ABS plastic for their Safaris. I don't actually know if their Vista is ABS plastic. Is that something you can make perfectly clear like that? Or maybe it's a different resin. I don't know. I was thinking like, oh yeah, they make the Safaris out of the ABS, but I don't know that the Vista is ABS. Might have to verify that. But either way, the Vista holds up pretty well. I have one that I bought. This was the first batch of pens I ever bought before we even started selling pens. So this would be now let's see here, that would have been 2009. So what is that math? 2009 to now, is that 16 years? I can't remember. Either way, it was a long time ago. Yeah, that'd be 16 years. So 16 years ago, around this time, it was in summertime, when I bought my first Lamy Vista. It's yellowed a little bit, just a little bit. All my other Vistas are great. So I don't know if they just haven't been around long enough, or maybe I don't know, did something that one, left it out in the sun too long or something. But and it's not bad, but it's showing its age a tiny bit. So yeah, I don't know about that one. I do think, based off our previous comment that we hear, the feedback that we had from, was it Paul? No, not Paul. Paul was talking about nibs. Addertooth, ebonite hard rubber, mentioned keeping it out of direct sunlight. That's going to be the best thing to keep your materials from getting brittle, to keep them from yellowing, is keep them out of direct sunlight. But if it's a pen that, what that means is, like, if you have a pen that you want to last, as long as possible, keeping it in like a pen case or a pen sleeve, not only for not having it be UV for like longevity's sake, but also, if you mentioned like dropping your pens and damaging them and stuff like that. I don't know if that's like while you're writing with it. If that's the case, then a pen sleeve or a case isn't going to help you. But, if you are carrying it around, keeping it in a case or a pen sleeve, keeping it in your pocket, keeping it in your bag, whatever, that will protect the pen better. And just keep it from getting scratched, keep it from getting as much like impact damage to it. So that could be a good thing as well. But yeah, so I would say generally, when it comes to demonstrator pens and the durability of their materials, given the fact that I don't know every single material and what it's made of, the best guidance I can really give is that you get what you pay for. Generally speaking, if you pay more for like these higher end resin pens, they tend to fare a little bit better over time. Your Sailors, your higher end platinums, not the preppy, but the higher end platinums, Pilot, things like that. Those are going to tend to fare better as demonstrators and not get damaged quite as easily as maybe some of the cheaper ones or some of the other ones. So maybe not the most helpful answer to you, but at least, I can sort of point you in the right direction a little bit. Also, I will say, TWSBI on the 580, I've talked with Philip about this before. Part of what makes that difficult, first off, I don't hear about cracks happening all that often. It certainly can happen, especially if you over tighten the piston mechanism. That's one place where the cracks can happen. If you're over tightening it, it puts strain on the resin back there. That's actually why they've added the ring in the back here, is to help keep that tension. Well, here's a 580. So, I just realized I don't have my overhead camera on. That's why they have the ring on the 580s, to help keep it, help the strain, keep it from cracking. But over tightening the piston mechanism can cause it to crack there. But part of it is the beautiful diamond pattern. Anytime you have, any angle or any thing like that, that's going to be an opportunity for there to be different like tension and different stress that's in the plastic. And I know that in particular, these pens are very affordable, but they're deceptively difficult to manufacture. And to get it with a lot of clarity, a lot of scratch resistance, I believe they have to like treat it in some particular way to be able to do that. And sometimes, it can be difficult to do that without it putting too much stress on the pen. So some of it has to do with like the scratch resistance process that you do to treat that. If things don't go well, then it can create a crack. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, the knob is the band is actually on the knob, not on the pen here. So yeah, there could. I think this is usually where cracks might form, is down by the threads. I've had that happen on one or two of my TWSBIs over the years, but I have a lot of TWSBIs. I think I have over 100 TWSBIs. And I haven't seen that many cracks. So a lot of it's going to depend on, how much wear, how much abuse they take. But I will say the TWSBI Eco is a different plastic than the 580. Still looks very clear. It's not that diamond pattern, because I think for whatever reason, It's not really achievable with that type of plastic or whatever, but the Eco I see holding up much better to abuse. Not much better, but it generally holds up better to abuse than the 580 does. So maybe try an Eco. They're also cheaper. Anyway, that's what I got on that one. All right, Luke Bedrosian, 5800 says, question, I bought my first non-vintage gold nib from y'all recently, a Pilot E95S. Good choice. That's, okay, let's see here. That said, are there certain permanent inks that I should stay away from, given that it is an integrated nib? Does it matter if this ink is pigmented, and are some better than others in terms of maintenance? Thanks. Yes, there are some that are better than others. Now, I love the Pilot E95S. The nib is fantastic. Not only is it pretty much the most affordable gold nib pen you can get from Pilot, but get from most manufacturers, but it's a really good writing nib too. It's got a little bit of bounce to it. You can get a slight line variation. I have the extra fine, which shows more of that. It's a great writing pen. There's a reason why it's as popular as it is. However, I tried to pull the nib out of mine just to see, like, could I do it if I wanted to? And after trying really hard and not being able to budget at all, I asked Jessica on our customer care team. She talked about her experiences a little bit because she's been here for a decade. And, she also sees a lot of pens as they come back through customer care. And you all who ask questions all the time. She's never been able to pull the nib off one. And we did some research, and it seems that the nibs are glued in place on the E95S. So I didn't verify that with Pilot, but that is what I read on Fountain Pen Network from somebody that says that they did that. And it would not surprise me if that's the case, because I tried like crazy to pull this nib off. It seems like it should be able to slide right out, but it's definitely like glued in place or something to where they don't want you pulling this thing out. So either way, even if it is possible, I will say you're probably going to damage something. But also it's not user serviceable. It's not meant to be pulled off. So don't go doing that. What that means is that, there may be some considerations in terms of inks that you may want to use or avoid when it comes to not just the E95S, but because there's really nothing about the E95S specifically that's going to be like problematic, other than the fact that you can't remove the nib or shouldn't remove the nib. But that's the case with probably a lot of fountain pens. Most pens you're probably not, unless you're just like a tinkerer and you love pulling nibs out. Most people are not going to pull nibs out of most of their pens. So it really kind of falls under the same principles that you would use with pretty much any other fountain pen. So I'll review that now, but yeah, in particular, because you can't remove the nib on this one, you may want to adhere to these a little bit more, unless you feel adventurous and you like taking things apart. So pretty much with most other fountain pens, the ink that you use, the cooler and wilder the properties are, probably the more maintenance it's going to be. Anything with a physical particulate in it, like pigmented ink and shimmering ink, it's going to be higher maintenance, and it's going to not be as good if it dries out in the pen. Now, this does seal up pretty okay, so you don't have to worry about it drying up in like a day or two, but it's the kind of thing, if you're not using it like super regularly, you may want to not leave a pigmented or shimmering ink sitting in this pen too long. You can flush it out. You can use an ultrasonic cleaner if it seems to get, kind of clogged a little bit. You can use pen flush and flush it through. The nice thing is, this does do a bulb syringe really, really well. You take your syringe, you shove it on the back, shove it on the back here. You can flush it all day long, use a pen flush or something like that. So that'll generally help you maintain it a lot. But it's just better not to let those dry out if you are going to use them. Iron gall inks, they're always going to be, something that they're more acidic, acids and gold. Not the best thing in the world long term. It's going to be a little bit harder to clean that fully out of the pen if you can't disassemble it, especially if it dries out. So it's kind of similar thing, just like the pigmented and stuff like that. So if you want to be like the absolute safest with your E95S or really any fountain pen, don't use those wilder property inks. Use conventional fountain pen inks. And you can kind of not have to worry about over maintaining it like that. Or you just, if you just use it, keep it in use, whatever ink you're using, use it regularly. And then when you're not going to use it, you clean it out of the pen. And then you'll pretty much be okay. Heavy sheening inks is kind of like a question mark for me. I haven't had any experiences or any issues that I've heard from anybody that have had problems using heavy sheening inks in a pen like this without a removable nib. But again, that's just like more X factors. It's a less conventional ink. So, take that for what it's worth. It might have some kind of issue with it. But I would not use highly staining inks, things that tend to be staining, like Noodler's base dates and stuff that are, wilder ink properties. But honestly, use your judgment. If you're going to put anything in here that's kind of wilder property, just put it in there for a few days, use it, clean it out, and then you don't have to worry about it as much. It's really the biggest issue is if you let it dry out in the pen. Next question we have is from MH7256. Can you show the size difference between the Jinhao X159 and the X450? I just recently got the X159 and absolutely love it. Now I'm wanting the X450, but not if it's too much bigger than the 159. That's a girthy pen. You don't have to worry about that. The 159 is bigger than the 450. So I have both. You can kind of see them next to each other here. 159, bigger. They both have a number 6. The regular 159 had a number 6 nib. The X159 is a number 8 nib. So you do have a bigger nib on that one. It's mostly just looks wider. It's not much longer, but it is bigger because it's kind of like shoved down in there. The grip is bigger, all that. Now the X450 is metal. So, and metal in terms of like what it's physically made of, not like metal. I mean, it is a little bit metal with the matte black there, but I don't know all the specs, but they feel somewhat comparable in terms of their weight, honestly, because this is thinner and a little bit smaller, but it's a heavier material. No, the X450 is heavier. The old 159, before the X version came out, was metal, had a smaller nib. It was very heavy. So this one is lighter. So the 159 is really nice. This one's going to feel a little bit heavier. But overall, they're both really great pens, especially for the price. So overall size, length when they're posted is going to look pretty similar. I figured why not? This is what video is for. The grip is certainly going to be different. It's much fatter grip on the 159. The 450 it's not really a triangular grip, but it's got a little bit of an indent there. So that may or may not be, well, I guess it is kind of a triangular. I realized I had on the bottom too. It's very subtle, but there is some texture to it. So you may not love that. You may love that. I don't know. And then length unposted, somewhat comparable. X159 is a little bit longer. And then, of course, the length of it capped. You'll notice some difference there. It's mostly the diameter. But yeah, both really comfortable. I would think if you like your 159 and you're curious about the 450, it's a relatively inexpensive pen, still writes well. Go ahead and get it. You won't regret it. All right, last question for this week. Wind Pilgrim has a very important question. It says, hey, Brian, inquiring minds want to know, Pepsi or Coke? I know there are some people that are very passionate, and it's very regional, at least in the US here. I don't know about globally. Probably. I mean, people are people. Some people are very passionate about which is better and which one is which. In specific regions of the US, it's like you don't even call it soda. You call it like Coke, I imagine like down in Georgia, like where they're headquartered. I believe I know some people from Georgia, and it's like, it's not soda. It's Coke. Whatever drink it is, it's Coke. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. All of our Georgian friends here. But anyway, so I like both. I am not super loyal to one camp or the other. I tend to lean Coke, but I do like different products across different brands. Most of these, they have like comparable versions of each other across Coke and Pepsi. And I kind of go back and forth as to which ones I like better. So I'll share those with you if you care at all. If you don't, I'm sorry. Just give me 2 minutes and I'll be done. I like I like Coke Zero. I grew up on Diet Coke. Love that aspartame. that tang that you get with it. I grew up with that, and that tastes normal to me. So I'm not as much of a fan of regular Coke. But Coke Zero is probably my favorite. I like that a little more than Diet Coke. Can't always find it necessarily, but Coke Zero Cherry or Coke Cherry Zero, whatever it's called. That's I think my favorite of the Coke types. My favorite Coke product is Fresca. I think that's my favorite soda overall is Fresca. I grew up having a lot of Fresca back in the 90s, and my dad loved it, and we just had a lot of it in the house. I find it like more refreshing. I don't know. But I love Fresca still to this day. I'll grab a Fresca first if it's available. It's not always available though. In terms of root beer, I prefer A&W, the Pepsi product, over Barq's root beer, but Barq's is good too. I definitely prefer Dr. Pepper over Pib Extra. Dr. Pepper is the Pepsi product. Ginger ale, I don't really like ginger ale because I basically only ever had it when I was feeling nauseous as a kid. So I guess if I have like a physical association with nausea related to ginger ale, it's fine if it's like mixed in a drink with something else. Not that I drink a lot of mixed drinks. But I just don't normally grab a ginger ale. I'll often, these days, I will often only have ginger ale when I'm flying because it is a little bit stronger flavor, and I sometimes am feeling nauseous on a plane. So I'm like, I'm already feeling nauseous. Let me drink my nauseous soda. And then last but not least, I have Sprite, which reminds me of my grandmother's house. My grandmother, the only soda she ever had was Sprite. And I never really drank a lot of Sprite growing up as a kid. So I'd visit her several times a year because she lived really far away. But she always had Sprite. And so it's like, oh, that was like the soda that I got to have at my grandmother's house. So, but also it's like, why bother with Sprite? Because Fresca exists and it's just so much better. So much better. Hot take. Fight me on that. I will not back down because Fresca is the best. Okay. Let's do the pen spotlight, shall we? All right. I got a big pen to show you here. Big pen. This is the Maiora Everest. You know, sometimes you get pens that are like made for specific reasons. Sometimes you get pens that you like, you know, this is going to be like a staple pen. This is going to be for everybody. It's going to be long lasting. That's not this pen. It's a limited edition. I think it's like 188 of each color worldwide that they're doing. It's a huge piston pen. It's just a ginormous pen. And I think they were going for the largest pen. Historically, there have been pens that have been obscenely large. So I'm not going to say it's the largest pen that's ever been made. But I believe it's the highest capacity piston filling pen made today. It has a 5 milliliter ink capacity, which is just ridiculous. So here is the pen. There's several different colors, so I will show you. It comes with a bottle of ink, which I'll ink up for you and show you what's going on. It'll suck up like that whole bottle. It does come with a little sleeve bag thing, which is kind of cool. They look different for each one, so I'll show you the different pens and the packaging that comes with them. So that's the black and clear demo, which is the one I chose for myself because I want to see the big ink capacity. Like, that's the whole point. But I actually like the other pens a little better. This is the red one. This is called the Volcania. It's a red and black hard rubber, ebonite, if you will. So that's pretty cool. Now, it's also got an ebonite feed on it, which is really cool. Giant number 8 gold nib. 14 karat gold nib. And, you know, this has a different sleeve on it, you know, more of a brown tone. And it's going to have a red ink that comes with it. So we'll set that there. And last but not least, we have Celestia. Celestia's got a blue sleeve, comes with a blue ink. And this is like a teal and sort of tan and black color. Now these ones have the most variation. So these are kind of like, these are going to look the most unique. Certainly the black and the clear doesn't look unique at all from pen to pen. It's pretty much straight up black. This one you see a lot of variation, so we photographed it with multiple different pens on there. This one, it's got a blue feed, which is kind of cool. So I'll show you these ones just so you can see what the material looks like. You know, it's a hard rubber. It's an ebonite, so it looks really nice. They polished it up a lot. Ebonite is really good for that. So if you're going for longevity, you get that with this material. Now this one, you know, there is no clear ebonite. So the clear body on this is resin, but the rest of it is going to be ebonite. And it's got an ebonite feed as well. So I was going to ink it up right with it and show you. I'm curious how easily it's going to ink up out of this bottle, because it's a very long nib, very large. So let's give it a shot, shall we? I will say this piston has the most turns on any pen that I've ever used. It is 12.5 turns to get this piston all the way down. So you start doing it and you're like, you feel like you're going for days. So to clean this pen out is kind of a pain in the butt, but you don't need to do it very often because 5 milliliters of ink lasts you a pretty dang long time. And you're not going to want to like fill this thing with ink samples and write and then change out your colors all the time. Now, will it fit? Oh boy, it's fitting in there, but I might have to tilt the bottle just to get, sorry, the angle of it I can't really show you. I guess I can sort of tilt the bottle and maybe get, it's like not, oh, it's getting in there, okay. Oh my gosh, it's just so much ink capacity. Let's see here. I do want to like get it filled all the way. So I'm going to stop partway through. I'm going to get all the air out of it, and I'm going to see if I can like max fill this thing. So get all the air out. Okay, there we go. I'm going to pull out an ink sample vial too, because I want to see how much actually you can get in an ink sample vial. And then I want to see if I can fill it from a sample vial as well. Now, our ink samples are only 2 milliliters, so you definitely wouldn't be able to fill it all the way. I think I have... I can't get it filled all the way because apparently after filling it probably 4 milliliters worth out of this little bottle, my ink level is no longer high enough to get it into the filler hole. So that's where you'll need something like an ink miser or something like that. Now, one thing that is really cool, I won't show you on this pen because I just inked it up. It is really nice that Maiora did this, but there is a unscrewable nib unit. So if you grip the nib, you want to be careful because it's a big gold nib. But if you grip it and kind of pinch it on the bottom of the feed and the top of the nib, then you can unscrew the nib unit out of here. And then you can access the inside of it there. So you can fill it sort of like an eyedropper and then drop this thing in there. Don't fill it all the way because you got to, you know, leave room for the nib unit, but you can fill it that way and then not have to worry about using the piston at all. And essentially it's just a giant eyedropper filler. But do you want to be doing that all the time with your pen, especially if you're refilling it and it's already inked up? Maybe not. Maybe you're nervous. Oh, see, I ganked up the nib just a little bit there. So it's a calculated risk doing it that way because it is such a big nib. So there you go. So my alignment's good. And I'll check that more off camera just to make sure I didn't do anything crazy to it. But anyway, assuming you're a normal human and you don't mess with your ridiculous $1,000 pens, got your pen inked up. Let me see here. Where's my pad of paper? I was going to just write with it a little bit. There's fine, medium, and broad on these. And let's see here. I have a fine here. It's a gold nib, but it's, you know, even though it's a large nib, it's not quite as like bouncy as, you know, some other larger gold nibs, like the Pilot Custom Urushi or the Pelican M1000. You know, it's around that size, but it's not as springy. It's a pretty thick nib. It feels really nice, very smooth. Flow is good. It's not like absolutely gushing. But I will say this is ebonite. I didn't clean out the pen first. You're supposed to do that. That helps to get any manufacturing oils and stuff like that, dust and all that stuff off of it. Whatever, I was too excited to do it in the video. Because, because of the material, because ebonite is a, hygroscopic, it will absorb some of the ink a little bit, and after it has time to kind of saturate in there a little bit, it'll reach a more consistent state of flow. See, it's already flowing a little bit better, even just writing with it just a little bit. So when you first ink it up, any ebonite feed pen, but especially one with this big of an ebonite feed, it might seem just a little bit dry, but it's like really, it's catching its stride now. And then, yeah. So there you go. Nice fine line. Honestly, for a European pen, it's pretty fine. It's pretty darn fine, especially if I don't write with a lot of pressure. If I write with some pressure, so no pressure, and then if I write with some pressure, you can definitely get a little bit of line variation there. But it's not like a huge flex. You don't have to press too hard. So it doesn't feel quite as springy, but it does have a little bit of line variation. It kind of, I don't know, it feels like I'm kind of getting used to it, maybe breaking in a little bit. But anyway, it's a little bit different than, like the Pilot Custom Urushi, which that was the other thing, is I wanted to show you a size comparison with some other pens. So just to show you how big this thing actually is. This is a Pilot Custom Urushi, which is already a big pen, makes it look smaller. Yeah, so there it is. Definitely bigger, bigger grip, bigger pen overall. Nib is around the same length, maybe slightly wider on the Custom Urushi. What other big pens do I have here? I have the Magna Carta Mag 1000, which is huge. This is actually longer than a Mag 1000, which is a kind of a laughably large pen. Now, the Mag 1000 nib, it's a steel nib. That's what makes this thing almost comical. The nib on the Mag 1000 is the biggest nib I've ever seen in my life. But it is definitely bigger. It makes the number 8 nib look puny. So yeah, Mag 1000 pen, still pretty flippin' big, but not as high of an ink capacity. Well, you can eyedropper convert this and you get just as high of an ink capacity, but you can't see through it. So Mag 1000, there you go. What else have I got? Here's a Pelican M1000. This is the old green ray, so it's covered in abalone. So nib size, pretty comparable. Pen size overall, the Maiora is bigger. Is bigger. They're fairly comparable in price though. The M1000s are going to run you, $1,000 and change probably these days. This pen was a limited edition, so it was more than that. But yeah, you can post it too. It's enormous, but it can be done. Yeah, so there's the Mag 1000 by comparison, which is by all accounts a very large pen. And then I wanted to show you compared to some like mortal size pens. Here's a TWSBI Eco, which looks like, a cereal box toy. Next to this thing, the nib on this is like, hello. Quite a bit of difference there. The grip is, like what, twice the diameter almost. Kind of crazy. Sorry, it's a little dark. And then the other one I have is a Lamy Safari. So here's the Lamy Safari next to the Maiora. Quite a bit different in size, especially you want to look at the grip. Yeah, that is a slightly different grip, all right. So yeah, anyway, those are your different pens. Maiora Everest, they call it Everest because it's the biggest. And that's just such a massive ink volume. Now, granted, I have like at least a mil of empty space in there, but even still, I want to take an ink sample and see how much I actually ended up with here. It won't fit all the way into an ink sample. So yeah, your ink miser is going to be the way to go filling this, but just for kicks, I want to try emptying out this pen in my ink sample to see how much ink I was able actually to get in this thing. Keeping in mind it was not filled all the way. I kind of wish I was able to fill it all the way. Oh my gosh, it's still going. Okay, I think I pretty much got it. There we go. Cap it so I don't turn it and look at it. So I'm a little bit below 4 mils right there. So yeah, I could have gotten another 1.25 mil in there probably, but that's still plenty of ink. Anyway, that's the Maiora Everest. Pretty cool pen, kind of a novelty, but a pretty cool novelty. So we have some of those available now at Goulet Pens. They're $1,000. It's a crazy pen, but some of y'all are crazy about pens, so you may be interested. I would fit into that camp, I think. Anyway, that's it for the Maiora. I'll share my adventures recently, and then I'll let you go. All right, let's talk about my adventures. I have a few. Nothing crazy. A lot of family stuff. It's like pretty normal family stuff. Not much to share there. But I had my niece and nephew's birthdays, so that was pretty fun. They're born pretty close together. So we got to celebrate with them, which was really cool. And this is fun because like my kids are getting older, you know, all their cousins are getting older, and we don't have a lot of like little kids anymore in our family, which I love little kids. I think they're adorable, but they're work. And it's really cool as the kids get older and more mature and their personalities come out. I don't know. It's really fun. I'm enjoying all of the family kids, you know, coming more into their own and stuff like that. So that's really cool to get to do that. You know, we were visiting my in-laws. So it was my sister-in-law and her kids, and then my in-law parents, and got to do some work because I just can't sit idle when I go visit. So I cleaned gutters at my father-in-law's house and power washed his house too, which was fun. I actually really love power washing. That's how I started out. You know, without power washing, Goulet Pens may never have existed because it was a seasonal nature of the power washing business I started with my dad started. I joined in, and you know, we didn't have business year round, so I needed something else to occupy my time. I started making pens, and then Goulet Pens became a thing. So anyway, I also brought my drums up there, which might sound a little bit crazy, but I just have been practicing a ton, and I didn't want to go without practicing, so I practiced a lot. And my sister-in-law actually plays the drums as well. Hasn't played drums in probably 20 years, but it was really cool. She hopped on and was able to play, you know, Boston, just like when she was a teenager. So that was really cool to get to see her kind of relive that and get to share, you know, I mean, we've known each other ever since Rachel and I met 24 years ago. So my sister-in-law, we're both the younger siblings as well. So had that like younger sibling bond, you know, like can't take ourselves too seriously, sort of goofy, trying to get attention, not feeling all the responsibility, you know, fun stuff like that. Also being told what to do all the time and getting treated like a little kid. Anyway, so yeah, we had a good time and nice little thing for us to bond over. And then let's see here. Also had another drum lesson. I had my drum teachers off for a couple of weeks. I was out of town. So it was like almost a month before I had another lesson. But I went back and oh my gosh, I'm getting my butt kicked a little bit because we had notations and we're going through playing Tom Sawyer from Rush. Great song, classic song, very challenging on drums. But I'm having fun learning. So that's been kind of cool. Let's see here. What else? 4th of July, all that kind of stuff. We didn't do a ton in that way. No fireworks or anything like that. But we did do a cookout with some friends and went to the pool and stuff like that. Lego botanicals. I love those. You know, I've got some Lego stuff back here, as you've seen, but I love the botanical ones because I've got a black thumb. I kill everything that I touch. Not on purpose, but I love fake flowers because they don't die. And they look really cool. So I love the Lego botanicals because we'll actually use them like around our house as, you know, like put them in a vase and they look like, and usually people come in and they don't notice right away that they are Lego, but they're like, oh, that's really nice. And yeah, and then whatever. And at some point people usually recognize, they're like, wait a minute, are those Lego? And it's really fun to get to kind of see all the different pieces and stuff. So I've had a good time with those. They put out a whole new series of botanicals. And so I've been having fun with those. I mentioned before how I have a bunch of trees that came down because we've had a lot of storms here recently. And so I had 4 trees that I had to clean up, and I did that last weekend. So that was really cool. It's fun to get my hands dirty there. And yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to. Working, drumming, playing with the kids, having late night conversations with my teenage children about the responsibility of driving and saving up for college and all these things. Oh man, I would not want to go back to being young again. So much stuff that they're like looking into, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, they have so much work ahead of them. Not that I'm not working a ton, but just like I'm through a lot of the early phase stuff, taking a lot of risks and worked my tail off, and I'm enjoying middle age, put it that way. Anyway, that's it for my adventures. So yeah, just thanks for watching. Leave me some feedback. Keep asking me questions because I want to take more questions so you can use for future episodes. I got a few more weeks here, and then I'm going to be taking a week off as well. So yeah, we'll get another couple episodes coming up for you. Check out Goulet Pens for fountain pen ink and paper, all that good stuff. And I have a truly random fun fact for you this week. Apparently there are only 2 escalators in the entire state of Wyoming. And both of them are in the capital of Casper. This is one of those like weird facts that you see on like a BuzzFeed article every now and then. I researched it a little bit because I'd heard about it years ago, and I was like, oh, that's a random fact. Let me look into it. So one of them is in the First Interstate Bank. It was installed when they constructed it in 1958. And the other is in Hilltop Bank, installed in 1979. So not only are there only 2 escalators, there used to be 3, but now there's only 2. But the newest one was built 50 years ago. That's kind of crazy. Why is that? It's the least populated U.S. state, and it's the second least population density, second only to Alaska, which is massive. And they just don't have a lot of multi-story buildings, which makes sense. Not a lot of people, ton of land. Why construct all this extra stuff when you don't need to? So there you go. They're not like anti-escalator, just doesn't make sense as much. So thought that was a little fun fact for you. But anyway, that's all I got today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next week, and ride on.